Larry Summers is a revolving door swamp creature guy. He was part of the Clinton and Obama administrations, and the reason why I'm talking about him today is because he is an advisor to Joe Biden. A little bit of history on Summers before we set up the stupid things that he said. Summers took part in the deregulation and neoliberalizing of the Mexican and Russian economies in the 1990s, led to horrible inequality and corporatization. He helped destroy the Glass-Steagall Act. Translation: from the 1930s through the 1990s, a bank could not take your deposit money and go gamble with it on Wall Street. Well, because of Larry Summers, because of Republicans in Congress, and because of Bill Clinton, they can now gamble with your deposit money. Larry Summers opposed greenhouse gas regulations. He teamed up with Enron. He has what is called a special connection with Jeffrey Epstein. He advocated bailing out Wall Street in the 2008 financial crisis, but not bailing out the 10 million homeowners. In other words, Larry Summers is always on the right side of history, so let's hear what he has to say about how we should respond to the economic crisis caused by COVID.
I don't think the $2,000 checks make much sense. We have stimulus already, much more than filling out the hole. And given that lots of the hole is from the fact not that people don't want to spend, but that they can't spend because they can't take a flight or they can't go to a restaurant, I don't necessarily think that the priority should be on promoting consumer spending beyond where we are now. So I'm not even sure that I'm so enthusiastic about the $600 checks. And I think taking them to $2,000 would actually be a pretty serious mistake that would risk a temporary overheat. I would like to see more assistance to state and local governments. I would like to see more money put into testing, more money put into accelerating vaccines. But gosh, David, I think it would be a real mistake to be going to $2,000. And I have to say that when you see the two extremes agreeing, you can almost be certain that something crazy is in the air. And so when I see a coalition of Josh Hawley, Bernie Sanders, and Donald Trump getting behind an idea, I think that's time to run for cover.
Did I mention that Larry Summers has like a $40 to $45 million net worth? Did I mention that? Considering this guy's track record, of course he thinks that way. I wish that this video was some sort of outlier, but corporate media has grabbed onto this let them eat cake narrative. Bloomberg: more COVID relief is needed, but $2,000 checks aren't the way. Washington Post: why increasing the stimulus checks from $600 to $2,000 is a bad idea. God. It's just so stupid what he said. Alright, let's start with the $600 check part. Because he pretends like $600 to every person is some sort of fringe extreme idea. Other countries have done what's called wage replacement. So in Germany, if you own a business and you had to lock down, then what happened was that the German government paid a significant portion of your employees' salaries, which meant that the business got to stay alive, the business didn't have to fire anyone, and therefore the workers got to retain their jobs but also not go homeless. Somehow, helping regular people is extreme to oligarchs like Larry Summers. His focus on consumer spending as if people buying shit is the be-all, end-all way to analyze the economy ignores the fact that people are really struggling just to pay for the basics. No, Summers would like to focus on more advanced metrics. It's really embarrassing, because this guy so clearly wants to be the smartest person in the room. It comes off borderline desperate. Really hope I never come off like this guy. I really hope I never come off like this guy. So maybe the dumbest thing he said is that giving people stimulus checks will, quote, overheat the economy. Now, if you don't speak the jargon of the business class here in America, according to Investopedia, An overheated economy is one that has experienced a prolonged period of good economic growth and activity that has led to high levels of inflation, which we aren't experiencing. Okay, so it says in my notes, explain inflation. So before you click off, I'm going to do it briefly, and I'm going to do it in a way that's easily digestible. Hopefully.
I'll give him a week.
I'll give him 11 minutes.
I remember in history class learning about the fall of Rome, and one of the causes was inflation. And inflation happened when the Romans diluted their currency, so they took some non-precious metal like zinc and mixed it in with their silver coins. And the way that it was taught to us was that their currency became less valuable because there were more coins. That's not how inflation works. Inflation does not work in the way that Larry Summers thinks, that there is an abundance. Inflation happens when there is scarcity. The reason why, in the Roman example, the coins were less valuable is because in each individual coin, there was less silver. A more modern example of this would be the inflation that occurred in the United States during the 1970s, which was in part fueled by shortages in oil. Pun not intended. If inflation was caused by abundance, then when the Federal Reserve under the Trump administration pumped trillions of dollars into the markets, that should have caused inflation, right? But it didn't. Okay, one last bit on inflation, and it's why the establishment people actually care about controlling inflation. Because there are certain groups in society that actually like inflation. Homeowners, for example. Because if there's high inflation, say 7-8% inflation, that would be very high, but your interest rate on your mortgage is 3-4%, that means that your mortgage rate is not keeping up with inflation. In other words, you're paying less and less and less over time, so long as your income keeps up with inflation. And that's a good deal for you. But the flip side of that is, it's not a good deal for the banks. And that's why the Larry Summers of the world, again, he's advising Joe Biden, so it's not like he's just some random dude, but that's why the Larry Summers of the world can care about controlling inflation. It's because with high inflation, banks make less money. And because bankers making millions of dollars and then funneling it to Larry Summers through the form of... I couldn't get paid speeches out of my mouth. They give him paid speeches. Unfortunately, Larry Summers isn't the only person who has these completely ignorant views on inflation. This is unfortunately how most people in the establishment view the economy. Alright, let's move on from inflation. I've talked about it enough. Larry Summers talks about more money to state and local governments, which would be positive. But I don't get why that's the be-all, end-all solution absent of survival checks. Why is it that Larry Summers thinks that the federal government, sending money to the state governments, sending money to the local governments, which then sends it to businesses, which then funnels down to workers? Why is that better than just giving money directly to people? Like, why are middlemen good? They certainly aren't more efficient. I find this culty view of business to be so bizarre. Why is it better to give businesses the money? Haven't you ever had a completely idiot boss? It's the 21st century version of, we must give money to the lords. The peasants can't be trusted with their own finance. Alright, then there's Summers' last comments about Bernie and Trump. And again, this is reflective of most DC centrists. Just because a person you don't like has an idea, that doesn't mean the idea is bad. Like Trump, for example, he killed the TPP, which was an awful trade deal. That was a good thing, despite the fact that Trump is obviously a terrible person. Even terrible people have good ideas. To pretend otherwise is to have a black and white middle school mentality. The world does not work that way. Larry Summers talking about the two extremes, as if people who are calling for a white ethno-state are on the same moral plane as the left, which wants everyone to have health care. Oh no. Now that the vacuum delay is over, I can resume the last 10 seconds of this video. So apply this kind of both extremes are bad thinking to civil rights. The left wants for all of us to be equal. The right thinks that segregation is correct. But according to Larry Summers' kind of thinking, it's like so extreme. I'm just superior for being in the middle. This is the kind of thinking that centrist liberal types use to justify not being for policies that would help more people, that would help alleviate more suffering. This kind of the extremes are both equal thinking. Anyway, this is a guy that Joe Biden trusts for economic advice. This is the kind of thing we'll be having to deal with for the next 4 years. Thank you to everyone that makes it to the end of my videos. Support independent media by liking and sharing this video and by clicking subscribe. This is Alien Perspective. Thanks for watching.